Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 12 NFL Power Rankings. So we'll start off by briefly recapping my rankings from last week and what those teams did in Week 11. Last week at number 10, I had the Bills. They beat the Buccaneers 44-32. Ninth was the Broncos. They beat the Chiefs 22-19. Eighth, I had the Buccaneers. They lost to the Bills 44-32. Seventh was the Eagles. They beat the Lions 16-9. Sixth was the Lions. They obviously lost to the Eagles 16-9. Fifth, I had the Chiefs. They lost to the Broncos 22-19. Fourth, I had the Colts. They're on a bye. Third was the Patriots. They beat the Jets 27-14. Second was the Rams. They beat the Seahawks 21-19. And one was the Seahawks, and obviously they lost to the Rams 21-19. Well, getting into this week's rankings, beginning things at number 10, I've got the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers check in at number 10 after they lost to the Bills by a score of 44-32. And this definitely wasn't their best performance for the Buccaneers. The offense was pretty solid, putting up 32 points, and they ran the ball really effectively, rushing for 202 yards and 3 touchdowns. And running back Sean Tucker also had a great game, as he ran for 106 yards and 2 scores. But while the run game was good for the Buccaneers, the pass game wasn't great, as Baker Mayfield threw for just 173 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And then defensively for the Buccaneers, they were not good, as they allowed 44 points and over 400 yards. But this definitely wasn't their best game for the Buccaneers, and they've now lost 3 of their last 4 games after a 5-1 start. I still do think the Buccaneers are a pretty good team, but I can definitely understand if you want to drop them further, but I've got the Buccaneers falling from number 8 to number 10. Ninth, I have the Bears. The Bears move into my top 10 for the first time in the season, and they check in at number 9 after they beat the Vikings 19-17. And this is another close game for the Bears, but it's another close game they're able to win. And it actually looked like the Bears were on their way to a pretty convincing win, but then they almost blew it, as they allowed the Vikings to score 14 straight, and then take the lead 17-16 for the Bears, and then picking a game-winning field goal as time expired. But this was a pretty solid performance for the Bears. The offense wasn't amazing, but they were decent. Caleb Williams was okay, throwing for 193 yards, but the Bears, they did run the ball pretty effectively, as they ran for 140 yards and got in the end zone. Now, the defense for the Bears, they did play pretty well, as they allowed just 17 points and 265 total yards, while also forcing 2 turnovers. But it's definitely not the prettiest win of the season for the Bears, but it's another close game they're able to win. They keep finding a way to win these close games, and after another win, the Bears are in a 7-3 first place in the NFC North, and I've got the Bears at number 9. Eighth, I have the Bills. The Bills move up a couple spots from number 10 to number 8 after they beat the Buccaneers 44-32. And this is a pretty solid win for the Bills. The offense looked great, putting up 44 points, and it was a great bounce back performance for the offense after they scored just 13 the week before against the Dolphins. But Josh Allen was insane as he threw for 317 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Plus, he also ran for another 40 yards and 3 scores. That is 6 total touchdowns for Josh Allen. And he was pretty much the entire offense for the Bills. Now, the offense was good, the defense for the Bills wasn't great, and the run defense continues to be a major concern. As the Bills, they allowed 32 points, and they allowed over 200 rushing yards and over 5 yards per carry. But not their best performance, they definitely have a lot of areas they can improve, but they are still able to beat a pretty good Buccaneers team, and I do have the Bills moving up a couple spots from number 10 to number 8. Seventh, I've got the Lions. The Lions drop a spot from number 6 to number 7, after they lost the Eagles by a score of 16-9. And this wasn't a very good game for the Lions, especially offensively, as they scored just 9 points, and that's their fewest points in the game, since they scored just 6 points back in Week 7 of the 2023 season in a loss to the Ravens. But the offense for the Lions, they were not good. Jared Goff had one of his worst games of the season, completing just 14 of his 37 passes for 255 yards, a touchdown and an interception, and the Lions also didn't run the ball too effectively, which is 74 rushing yards on 3.5 yards per carry. And maybe the biggest problem for the Lions offense is they were terrible on 3rd down and 4th down, as they went just 3 for 13 on 3rd down and 0 for 5 on 4th down. And I know I've seen a lot of people criticizing Dan Campbell for going for it so often on 4th down, but I really didn't hate the decision for Dan Campbell to be aggressive, especially with how good his defense was playing. The offense just didn't make plays. Now, speaking of the defense for the Lions, the defense actually played really well. They allowed just 16 points and 3.9 yards per play, and the defense should have gotten a stop late in the game to get the ball back to the offense with a chance to tie or win the game. But obviously the refs had to get involved and give the Eagles a pass interference call, which is one of the worst pass interference calls I've ever seen. But it's definitely not the best performance for the Lions. It's very encouraging to see their defense play well, but of course for the Lions, when their defense plays well, the offense looks terrible. But the Lions, I still think they're a very good team. They're now 6-4 in the season, and I've got them at number 7. Number 6, I've got the Broncos. So the Broncos move up to number 6 after they beat the Chiefs by a score of 22-19. And this is another nice win for the Broncos. On the offensive side, they looked pretty good as they put up 22 points against the great Chiefs defense, and Bo Nix finally had a good game. as he threw for 295 yards. Now, it's definitely a good thing Knicks did have a good game because the Broncos could not run the football, running for just 59 yards and a touchdown on 2.8 yards per carry. And then the defense for the Broncos, they also played pretty well, as they allowed just 19 points, and they also got 3 sacks and forced a turnover, although they did allow over 300 total yards. But it's another good win for the Broncos. It's another win where they win it late in the fourth quarter, actually winning this game on a walk-off field goal. But the Broncos, they're now 9-2 on the season. They've won 8 straight games, and they're in a really good spot to win the AFC West for the first time since 2015. But it's another good win for the Broncos, and I've got them at number 6. Fifth, I've got the Eagles. The Eagles check in at number 5 after they beat the Lions by a score of 16-9. And this is the second game in a row for the Eagles where their defense dominated and their offense looked pretty bad. But starting with the defense for the Eagles, they were great. They held the second highest scoring offense in the NFL to just 9 points. And the defense, they were also great on third down and fourth down, and their pass rush dominated, pressuring Jared Goff on over half his dropbacks. Now, the defense was great. The offense for the Eagles was not so good, as they allowed just 16 points and averaged 3.9 yards per play, and they were not good through the air or on the ground. As Jalen Hurts completed just 14 of 28 passes for 135 yards, and on the ground they ran for just 3.7 yards per carry. But it is another win for the Eagles, and they are now 8-2. Now, I do still have them at number 5, which is, I know, a lot lower than a lot of people would have them, but I still think this Eagles team is good, but they're not elite, especially with how bad their offense is. But I will give them credit, they do have an elite defense, and I do have the Eagles at number 5. Fourth, I have the Seahawks. So Seahawks, they fall from number 1 to number 4 after they lost to the Rams by a score of 21-19. And this wasn't a great performance for the Seahawks. But despite it not being a great performance, they still had an opportunity to win this game, as they tried a 61-yard field goal as time expired, but ended up missing the kick. But the offense for the Seahawks wasn't great. Sam Darnold had his worst game of the season, throwing 4 interceptions, but Jackson Smith-Njigba still had a great game, with 9 catches for 105 yards. And JSN has now had at least 100 yards in 5 of his last 6 games. And then running the football for the Seahawks, they were okay, as they ran for 135 yards and a touchdown, but on 3.9 yards per carry. Now, defensively for the Seahawks, they were pretty solid. They allowed 21 points and 249 total yards. And overall, I feel like the Seahawks defense played pretty well when they weren't put in a tough spot and coming on the field right after a turnover. But I'm going to drop the Seahawks to number 4. I don't want to drop them too far because they played a pretty bad game, turning the ball over 4 times, and they still almost beat one of the best teams in the NFL. But I still think the Seahawks are a really good team, but obviously they did end up losing, so I'm going to drop the Seahawks to number 4. Number 3, I have the Colts. The Colts check in at number 3. They're on a bye this week, but they're throwing 8-2, and they're half a game back of the top seed in the AFC. Next week, the Colts have a huge game as they face the Chiefs in Kansas City. Second, I've got the Patriots. The Patriots, they continue to move up in my power rankings as they're up to number 2 after they beat the Jets by a score of 27-14. And this is another good game for the Patriots. Drake made another great game, throwing for 281 yards and a touchdown, and Stephon Diggs also played well with 9 catches for 105 yards. And he's actually having a really nice season despite being 31 and coming off a torn ACL. And then rookie running back Travion Henderson also had a great game for the Patriots as he had 3 total touchdowns, 2 rushing, 1 receiving, and he has 5 total touchdowns in the Patriots' last 2 games. And then defensively for the Patriots, they also played pretty well as they allowed just 14 points, got 2 sacks, and forced a turnover. But it's another good win for the Patriots. Their winning streak is now up to 8 games, and I've got the Patriots at number 2. And coming in at number 1, I've got the Rams. The Rams, they move up to number 1 after they beat the Seahawks by a score of 21-19, and this is a good win for the Rams. On the offensive side of the ball, they were pretty solid, scoring 21 points, although they only had 250 total yards. But I do think that's more because they always had a short field to work with because of all the turnovers, and not the offense could move the football. But Matthew Stafford played pretty well, throwing for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, and the Rams, they were also great on the ground, rushing for 119 yards and a score on 5.4 yards per attempt, and they did that against a great Seahawks defensive front. And then the defense for the Rams, they played well. They allowed just 19 points, and they also picked off Sam Darnold 4 times, plus they were great in the red zone, allowing just 1 touchdown and 4 red zone trips. Well, this is a big win for the Rams. They're now 8-2 on the season, in first place in the NFC West, and tied for the Eagles for the best record in the NFC. But the Rams, they've now won 5 games in a row, and I've got them at number 1. Well, those are my Week 12 NFL Power Rankings. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.